Okay, so I'm gonna just, maybe I'll say a few things, but let me go ahead and just do this screen share so we have something to look at while I'm talking. Okay, so one sec, back to the top here. All right. So thank you everybody for having me. I'm very excited to get to meet all of you and share a bit about myself and just, I guess, the path I went on and where I am now, possibly, I guess, where I'm headed. And, you know, maybe I thought that I would touch possibly, you know, like maybe on like some technical stuff as we get into it, with specifically more of that alla prima style, just because it's the bulk of what I do, and there's some other passions I have, like kind of why I like it so much, and certain things like revolving around, like, you know, paint application and color that that I love. And I think alla prima really, you know, allows you to play with while you're working. And so that's like some of the technical stuff. Like it will not, of course, be a hyper technical lecture by any means, but that is part of it, why I like it and all that. So when we get into that, maybe there'll be some color chat, which might spur some questions that you guys are more than welcome to ask, which I know that the bulk of you guys don't do traditional oil painting. I believe it was more watercolor and acrylic, but in regards to the way that we see things, I would imagine very much that it would translate. So maybe you'll end up inspired for your own work. So we may as well begin. This image here I have up is one of my earliest paintings that I had done shortly after leaving Florence Academy. So the way that it went with me was I had always done art my whole life, like drawing. I was a kid who would draw, which I guess is not particularly unusual, but I really stuck with it. And I had very supportive parents who, I mean, I've referenced this before, and it stuck with me, I guess, just because it was a fun thing that my mother had said, and then remembering it later in life is like a weird thing she said, where I had been very excited to see The Little Mermaid. It came out when I was like 4 or something, and I really wanted to see it, and I got so excited, and I didn't understand the concept of waiting. Like I saw the commercial for it, so I assumed it was out, and I was like, we have to go and see it. We have to go see it. And
I don't know how.
She said, okay, well, we can't go. It's not out yet, but we'll go. But in the meantime, if you're this excited, you can draw the characters and you can like see them now or whatever. And that's like why I think it was such a weird thing to say. Like, I don't know if I would have thought to tell my kid that just casually, like, just go and draw them. You could see them now. I don't know. I thought it was wonderful and odd. So I did that. And that really literally from that point got me drawing ever since. And fast forward many years, and it had continued to be my goal to work for Disney. So I was really into characters and illustration, and looked up where Disney took its people from, and that was Ringling College. So that's how I got to Ringling College. While I was there, I decided I didn't want to work for Disney anymore. Just because I was really enjoying it, but it was just like, it didn't feel like what I was naturally meant to do. It was something that I really appreciated and loved. But every time I would do my own illustration, like for projects at school or whatever, it ended up being done in oil. So graduated from college, I ended up working for Hallmark Cards for a handful of years. And that company is fantastic. They're filled with really great people. Everybody is provided with like top of the line stuff for being able to work. And it was great, but like, it was, again, similar to like how I was at college and then had this feeling like I wasn't supposed to work for Disney anymore. I was shown my desk at Hallmark, which was this fantastic desk around fantastic people with incredible equipment. And I just didn't want it. It was like day one, I knew I didn't want to work there. So I'd go home and I'd paint, and I wasn't very good at it because that was the thing. It's like I felt very inclined to paint, but I wasn't good at it. But somehow it felt like this thing I was supposed to be doing. So I would go home every day and work like it was my job. I don't know why I did this, but I felt like it was what I really wanted to do. So I had some friends who were attending Florence Academy, and they were like, well, you got to come, you got to come. So I went. So I quit my job and put everything in a storage unit, and I went to Florence. And that was how I learned how to do work like this. They put you through a pretty strict program of drawing and eventually, of course, like painting. But when you would do that, it was always just like studying ahead, doing figure painting. The paintings were not particularly colorful either, which was, I'll say now, something that really stuck with me because I was never really taught color in college. And then Florence Academy doesn't teach you color either. They do a lot with drawing and value, but not so much with color. And I never would have thought anything of it. But until I started painting, like by the time you get into a full palette where they ask you to fully paint the figure, I did it. And one of my teachers came up to me and was like, legitimately asked me if I was colorblind because I wasn't seeing the colors well. And looking back on that, it's particularly funny because they weren't teaching us color. So no wonder I wasn't seeing it properly, but I guess I was exceptionally bad at it. I don't know. So it ended up being like this mission of mine to understand color better. And so while I was on that journey to understanding color, all of this, in the meantime, I had graduated Florence Academy, moved back to New York City, and I had it in my head to be doing work like this, something that was more a blend of my love of illustration and traditional oil painting. And I was also very new to all of this. I was an illustrator at heart. I didn't have like a background, history, and passion for traditional oil painting like many of the people who went to Florence Academy. So there was a lot I didn't know. I didn't know like the history of oil painting, like something like this you might consider to be more like a pre-Raphaelite type of painting, but I didn't know that that was a thing. I just knew I wanted illustration and oil painting to come together, and I didn't know that that was what artists like, say, Waterhouse were doing. I just knew I liked that. I didn't know about Waterhouse at the time. So when I got back from Florence, this is the kind of work I started doing. And so it was based on, this one is based on Morgan Le Fay. So it's like this King Arthur story. And I thought it would be a nice exercise in bringing what I knew about Florence Academy, like figurative work, traditional technique of just applying this color, this paint to these figures. I started getting a bit of an interest in including animals in my work as well. And just like overall composition, being able to figure out like how to actually compose. So these were interests of mine: color, figure still, bringing in animals, composition. Of course, also some different textures. These were things I was interested in. So you can see it, how these two, actually these three, this one, and this one, are quite similar. Clearly a theme. Gold leaf in the background, some kind of design like this in each one. Figurative work. So this one here, clearly something was resonating with me, that when I did this, I really liked that. This was already speaking to me, but I think that it's quite interesting that whenever something tends to come naturally, it never feels, to me at least, it doesn't feel like the thing you're supposed to be doing. It's almost like it's too easy. So that can't be the thing that you're doing. Like it didn't feel like there was a challenge in it. So it's really easy to disregard. I just sort of liked this and thought it was a nice element of the painting, but it wasn't necessarily something I thought really twice about. But clearly that's not 100% true, because I got into this and was like, once again, had a lot of pleasure painting this part of the painting. Again, it was an idea of composing, texture, figure work, and of course, these three guys down here. They were like the star of the piece to me. I really liked working on those guys. So it was like the wheels were starting to turn of like, oh, maybe doing something with animals would be kind of fun for me. So it moves on, of course, ebbs and flows. Sometimes there's animals, sometimes there's not. And you could see in each of these how I'm still sticking with this idea of some kind of illustration. When I was a kid, I was really into that book, Aida. And when I composed this one, that was just something I was thinking of. It's not necessarily a character from that book, but it was inspired by, and it was just like an Egyptian princess, Romeo and Juliet kind of story. So after that, I was getting, I don't know if it was burnt out, but there was something kind of missing in each of those that, and I didn't really know what it was, but I was always a little bit more interested, maybe not more interested, but at the very least, just as interested in more psychological stuff than just straight up illustration. Something that was more like, say, in your face, where it was a little bit easier to tell what some of these might be. I like covert, like secret kind of stories that it's like, think a little bit about it and the idea might come, or you'll never figure it out, but it's still kind of a nice image. Like I like sort of like hidden like Easter eggs in pieces. So this came about, this one's one of my favorites, actually. I still have this in my house. I basically I have no intention of selling it. And if I ever put it up for sale, which I don't anymore, I put it at such a high price point, it's basically never going to sell because I really don't want to. This is a personal favorite of mine. And with things like this that are significantly more involved, it might seem weird to see this, which feels so much more simple, and wonder why this would resonate. And so when I was back from Florence and working on those other pieces, I was relatively alone in the city. I had grown up in New York, but you know, when you're gone for that long, like 4 years in college, like 3 years in Missouri working for Hallmark, and then another 3 years in Florence Academy, people move away. And so when I came back, then there wasn't really anybody left. People had moved. So I was there alone, and I didn't even really have too much of a goal other than just to paint. And so in feeling so alone, I do a lot of reading, listening to podcasts, and just having random interests. I always really thought that there was something kind of romantic about the idea of like echolocation, like sonar. So the way that that works is, it's just like, to say it simply and quickly, it's a pulse goes out and you wait for an echo to return. And that's how you know that something is out there. You wait, it's like the like Hunt for Red October, you know, the little like sonar blip. That's what that is. It's like every time it blips, that's the pulse receiving an echo that something's out there. So this was a friend of mine, or a new friend of mine who I had asked to pose for me. And that was the concept. It was being very alone in a void and sending out pulses to see who was there. So what I ended up doing was, there was an intent for it to have a partner where they're very big. This one is 6 feet tall, and there was another one that was 6 feet tall, and it was supposed to be something like this. This girl with this kind of lighting, not necessarily meant to be this pose, but this was ultimately basically the companion piece for it, the echo. And, you know, I liked the way I had it organized. I liked the concept. I liked that. I liked that it was 2 completely separate paintings. So divided by the individual canvas, divided by the frame, that they're both out there, but don't know the other one is there, with the exception of this little blip on a screen. So this painting still exists. Somebody has purchased this one, but I don't have this one anymore. This one I don't have the companion piece anymore, the official companion piece, because hilariously, or maybe not so hilariously, I ended up having a minor studio fire, which destroyed the companion piece to this one. So I had a desire to paint it again, but kind of ended up deciding that maybe it was a little bit more tragic to not paint it again, that there's just this one always searching for the other. So we'll see, but for now, this is the only one. From there, it started evolving, and also, I guess, in a way, like reverting back to what I was doing at Florence Academy. But pieces like this and this one, is that the only, yeah. So pieces like this and this, you could feel a little bit more in line with what you might be familiar with traditional oil painting, something that would come from an atelier, just figurative work. You can also see that it's not particularly dissimilar from something like this. Single figure, dark background, single figure, dark background. However, this was I was wanting to paint work like this at the time. You could see how in each of these, there's like a little bit of a common thread. It's like they all jump from the other. So it was like, this was a desire to return to what I had grown up with, like more illustration. This was a solitary figure with a more interesting background, similar to this, but a little bit more calm. This was a single figure, dark background, not dissimilar from this one, just slightly less illustrative. Then we get into this, which is once again now a single figure against a dark background. So I don't seem to make very large leaps. I kind of like just understanding what I like from an old painting and bringing an element of that into the next painting. So this one was, again, similar to this, but I was sort of unhappy that I went back to this old interest of just very, what I was seeing at the time as being very simplistic atelier style work, where it's like just a figure and that's it. And I'm also not a big fan of how people will do you know, still lives or just a figure standing, and then put a very lofty title on it, as if that's supposed to inject meaning into the work. Meanwhile, you got as far as, I want to paint a figure, and then you're hoping your title does all of the heavy lifting. So having my own issues with that, when I painted this and even this one, they were not, this one a little less so, but this one was me making like a kind of like inside joke with myself about Florence Academy, where it was just sort of girl with a bowl. Like that was it. It was just, that was me just sort of poking fun at, you know, those lofty ideas, just girl with bowl or whatever. So in the spirit of understanding that I'll take little elements of each painting and grow little ideas from them, like the next thing I'd like to do, this one was the first time I had played around with using a different technique, like for this dress. When I had painted this dress, I had done it entirely with my palette knife. I don't know if you'd be able to see it, maybe a little bit. But there's actually a lot of paint on this dress, and there's a lot of texture. All of it was done, like I said, with a palette knife. And I was just sort of curious to see how that would look, like what it would look like to paint the way I would normally paint this way and offset that with that different technique. See if it would even work, like if it would look too alien or what. I decided I felt like it worked. So I started experimenting once again with composition, except the composition was done entirely with the light shapes. I was composing with light here a little bit more than just lots of different elements. It was just, I liked this shape and wanted to offset it against this darker background. But so that was part of it. Definitely this idea of just composing with light. But also I wanted to paint that dress again. I liked the idea of using that texture. Okay, so now maybe a little bit of a leap, but not necessarily. So remember, I had started painting those cats in that early work. After I had done these pieces, I started thinking, I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do next? And I had started a large piece, and I don't even really remember what it was, but I had started a large piece and it was fine. But throughout the day I would work, and I have a very tight schedule, or regimented schedule. Like I know what time I want to get into the studio and what time I want to leave, and then I leave. And when I'm at the easel, I don't really take any breaks. Like I'm pretty committed to just working straight through. So it's like, if it's an 8-hour day, I am sitting at the canvas working all of that time. So that's great for getting work done, but I'm often very tired at the end of that. So I would ride my bike home and thinking I was done for the day. I was very tired. And then I would just like have some dinner and sit around just sort of wondering what I was going to do. Decided, I was like, well, maybe I actually want to paint, but I don't want it to be a person because I'm tired of painting people. I just spent 8 hours painting a person. I don't want to paint another person. So I started painting this. I started painting cats, and it makes sense for me. I have cats, but the reason why I didn't paint my cat was because I don't have hairless cats. I have regular fluffy cats. And what I wanted was something that I didn't find to be too much of a challenge. So that's why I was choosing these Sphinx cats, these hairless cats in the beginning. They're not necessarily the easiest things in the world, but if you think about it, it makes sense. I was painting people, skin, and I know how to paint people and skin. So I thought painting a Sphinx cat would be great because I understand how to paint skin. I understand how to paint wrinkles and whatnot. But because it's an animal, you're getting all of these different colors. Like our skin has a lot of color in it. whatever tone it is. There's a tremendous amount of color in there. But you're not going to get something like this, you know, like their skin can look just like purple or just like almost like neon blue sometimes. So I liked that. I liked the idea of still being able to paint what I knew, but with different colors. So this is starting to get back into like to do like a more aggressive dive into my exploration of color. So all of these, you could see, you know, the color I think feels pretty rich in these. Nothing like it feels, the colors are not chalky. It feels relatively three-dimensional, and it's sort of everything in its place. Like nothing's too chalky or muddy, or it's all like nicely organized. The color is there. And I have a way of finding these colors through comparison, not perfect color matching. And that was something I had discovered in my quest for understanding how to see and use color, was that what I've started describing to people is that color is everything and nothing all at the same time. We see color everywhere, but you know, it's not one thing. Like my cup, this cup is blue, and maybe a certain kind of like saturated blue, very vibrant blue, but there will be a blue that is more vibrant than this or less so. And when you put it next to that, it'll make this cup look more or less saturated and possibly even change the color of it. So of course, then you could just perfectly color match whatever that's going to be. But, and this is the part of the technical part of the lecture. But what I was discovering is that like, I liked to think about color the way that I just described it. It's all really fluid. So I don't want to color match something as if that is the color. It's not the color, it's just the color it is because it's next to something else. So whenever I would be looking for colors like this, let's say just quickly find something in here. Like this cheek over here might look like the same color as what's over here, but it's not. This one is mixed with a richer color. This side is a little bit more chalky. This side is also more orange, and this side is also more pink. And it's all just from comparing. I would bounce my eyes around everything, just really making quick and hopefully accurate comparisons. Like even how you see that there's like a pink down here in the chin, this one is significantly more orange than the other two. So I was playing with color, but you could see that how, since this image is overwhelmingly warm, it's a little bit difficult to really explore it because it has to still be so warm based on this reference. So when I got down into stuff like this, there was a lot more to play with where I could really be doing comparing and painting and all that. So I started getting into it. You could see like this shot of blue down here was really fun, and how by the time that blue went in, I could like start experimenting with all of these like pinks and purples, that like emerald green that's in the ear. Again, relatively tame. I'm not the most colorful painter of all time. I'm still relatively subdued, but even though it's subdued, I'm finding a lot of color in the pieces I'm creating. So when I decided to do this, I started realizing that it was very fun. And I continued doing it for fun. Every piece was just done for fun. And I would post it on Instagram with some insecurity. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, nobody was painting animals really at the time. And it almost felt like, well, I don't know what it felt like, but especially going through Florence Academy, like people would really downplay animal painting. For some reason, it was not a thing to pay much attention to. which I think is hilarious, that you'll really elevate a cup, but not an animal, an inanimate object versus a living thing. A cat is not worth as much as a bowl of onions or cherries, apparently. So going to Florence Academy and knowing what people felt about this at the time, it felt weird. So I was like a little embarrassed to post it. I was embarrassed that it was a growing interest of mine. But I liked it. I mean, this cat is another hairless cat, significantly more color than this one. So once again, exploring painting skin, and these were my first real attempts at alla prima as well. Each one of these was probably about 3 hours. That tends to be about how much time I'll spend on an alla prima. I didn't necessarily intend on giving myself a time limit or anything like that, and I guess I still don't. It's just that kind of works out to be how long I spend on them. But with the primary focus of this color exploration, where are the warm areas versus the cool ones, and you know, what color is this pink versus this pink? You know, how are you going to see that stuff? How are you going to apply it, and will it be successful? These were really fun things to explore. So I was getting like a real second wind after I would come home. And before I knew it, I mean, this was like just the real passion. I really loved this. I liked the immediacy of it. I liked how I was able to challenge myself, how I was able to understand everything I had learned from Florence Academy of how to, you know, create atmosphere in a piece, keep your shadows thin and your light areas thick, so that way you can feel the light and pass through the shadows. How you don't need, I didn't need to labor over this for weeks and weeks, how I understood that concept and could keep areas like this very thin and build up towards the lights in places like this. How quickly could I create this atmosphere, use the paint, find the colors, get the values correct, you know, finding surprise blues here, like the blue up here in the ear, like what can you do in a limited amount of time? I liked the challenge of it. I liked the different subject of it being not being a person. Everything about it was like, by the time I got to around this one was when I was like, yeah, I definitely want to keep doing this. Love it. So it was also around this time. And of course, these are highlights, like I had done many in between, but it was somewhere around this time that more people were noticing what I was doing and were asking for larger, more substantial paintings, because these were small. These were just like 12 by 12s. So I got into stuff like this. So this one was much bigger. This one I think was 36. It's not quite a square. It's, for some reason, I didn't make it a square. It's like, it was like 34 by 36 or something. I don't know. It was not a perfect square, but anyway, something like that, 36 at its longest side. And so this was the first time that I had really gone back to a more Florence Academy method, while putting into play everything that I had been learning from doing these alla primas: freshness of color, understanding value, old things like from my original work with composition. So it's like, it's all starting to come together of like a little bit of storytelling here, you know, like where is this guy and whatever, like not too much of a story here, but you know, there's a little bit more of a narrative in this one. Elements of color that I'm learning from alla prima, paint technique, all lumped into or tied up in the techniques that I was had learned from Florence Academy, which were an ability to draw and see values properly. And like I had said with this guy, understanding how to move things back in space and bring things forward in terms of actual just paint application. After this, I was getting more. Here's another one, this greyhound. I was asked to paint this. Actually, I think somebody in Connecticut bought this. I was living in New York at the time, so I don't remember where I shipped it, but I think somebody in Connecticut has this guy now. But this one was really fun because this was also just like this one, a larger piece. So worlds meeting in terms of all the stuff that I was learning. But this one also tied in another piece where you could see there's a lot of texture in this one. So what I had done here was I put a texture into my ground. So it was similar to my dress that I had painted. How I had done that with the palette knife, I knew I liked this idea of working with texture. So when I did this one, I thought, well, what if I just texturize the surface? So I did that and then just sort of painted on top of it. It was really simple, but it was just sort of like a, what would happen if I played with texture here? And this was the result, which I am quite happy with the way it turned out. The texture was not particularly overwhelming, but you got some nice little things like this area I like quite a bit. And all of this as well, just these weird little like divots and stuff like in the canvas that just happened randomly that I thought just added a nice little element to the piece. After that, of course, in between all these bigger pieces, I was still doing smaller alla prima work, which was starting to become basically the career I have now, which is I do a ton of commission work, all of which came through posting on social media. My account grew completely organically over time, and I would just post these types. People would then inquire for bigger pieces. And in the meantime, I would continue doing these smaller ones. And at this point, I'm painting at least one alla prima a day, like one commission a day for people. And I love them. I mean, or rather, I love doing them. I love doing them. I felt very fulfilled and happy when I had identified what I liked painting in all of my work, like the early ones, like how I liked the animal sections of the paintings best. Kind of trying to start embracing that, or rather inadvertently embracing that, and then ultimately being able to paint in larger form like this and bring other elements together, right? Like all that Florence Academy stuff, the illustration stuff, alla prima work, all coming together. And I was just feeling really happy about all of that. I still feel really happy about that. And when it just seemed like it was going to continue moving, I fully embraced it, and I'm happy to do it. You know, it takes up a ton of my time. And, you know, sometimes people will ask often, but even myself personally, I'll feel, you know, you question it sometimes when it is eating up so much time, where it's like, well, I don't have a lot of time for my personal work anymore. And I think that's very natural to want to acknowledge that and try to find the time for your own work. But even when I feel that way, I will still have commissions like this I need to do. And I do them, and I'm happy to. Like, the animals are precious. I mean, I'm a huge animal lover. And so people will email me at this point, will you paint my animal? It's like, yeah, of course, I'm never going to turn it away. But also it's like, even if I'm tired or in a mood or whatever, you get a picture sent to you that looks like this. It's just like, I mean, how are you not going to be happy to do it? I like the images. I like getting to paint them, and I am thrilled with like the response it gets. Like, I'll get these beautiful emails from people and talking about if the animal passed away, and, you know, how they're crying when they got the image and they're so happy to have it, and it's like they're back in the house or whatever. Like, just, you know, really heartfelt emails come my way, and it's extremely fulfilling. So I love it. So it continues. Let's see here, actually. So these here are some of my favorites, and all alla prima. And you could see, you know, different things that I'm exploring, like cast shadows, cool shadows, warm light. Like it's always an exploration of a certain level of composition and, of course, color. Same thing here. Not too much in here. I mean, I like this image a lot. I like the colors. Excuse me. I like the colors. I like the technique I used on it. I like these little surprise bits of color that I can find. Well, this one too here, composition. But when it's something like this, let's make this one a little bigger. And this should feel to you maybe similar, once again, to the Greyhound or the dress that I had painted. Like I have a continued interest in texture. I like being able to use it and balance it with other techniques like this, which would be a traditional alla prima of just thin shadows, thick lights, and just using a brush to apply that paint. Exploring color, you know, green here, purple here, pink nose, all of this stuff. But then checking out the background, maybe it would be fun to use a palette knife back there. So this was where I started. I don't do it in all of them now, but a lot of the times lately when I'm putting my backgrounds in, I'll use my palette knife to play around with some texture. So that's a new way that things might be evolving for me, or not. I don't really like to set those kinds of goals. I like to just see what's going to happen, but it's an interest. And this one was not done with palette knife, but I did make an effort to really apply significantly thicker paint in the face here. And you could see that it's just a little bit different. It's just a little bit of a different technique. I was using smaller brush strokes, really trying to go for it with texture. Whereas something like this is still strong, but noticeably more smooth, I think that you can see. Then I thought it would be kind of fun to run through these images very quickly, just tell a story here. When I was exploring all of this stuff, just painting commissions, painting things for myself, these smaller alla primas, these were no different. These are also alla primas. But I had decided to just randomly get back into something that was significantly more illustrative. Just on a whim, I had painted this cat on these lily pads, and that was the only one that I did. And I ended up feeling really inspired by it. I really liked it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do another one with this kitten. That's kind of cute. So after I had started having those thoughts, by the time I got to this second painting, I decided I was going to do a little story. And I don't think of myself as a storyteller at all. I think doing children's books is extremely difficult. It's something I don't know anything about. So maybe in terms of casual storytelling, this story is no good. But it was just something I wanted to play with and just sort of see what happened. So at the very least, it was an exercise in composition, definitely storytelling, certainly color. Okay, so I'll just run through the story with you. Actually, I'm just going to check really quickly because I forgot I wanted to take note of the titles. Let's see if I could remember the titles. I don't think I wrote them down, but let's see. Let's just tell the story first. So we have this kitten on some lily pads, and then we've got her falling through the lily pads. So you could see composition here, really playing around with some pretty extreme perspective. That was fun. Falling again. So by the time I got to this one, it was more like I was not more like, I always had this idea in my head that maybe we're going to explore using color to convey different feelings, where you could see here this pretty average day, right? Just pretty sunny and nice, probably pretty calm outside. Then, we're still pretty close to the surface, so the colors seem very similar, but it's starting to get a little darker down here, so it's a little bit scarier. Then down here, used this blue to create something that felt a little bit more cold and isolated. We're significantly farther away from the surface, so things are, and definitely darker down here, scarier still. Then all of a sudden she gets to the bottom, and I'm using these colors to convey, of course, water, but this is feeling a little bit similar to this, right? Like cooler because we're at the bottom of the lake, but also warmer colors down here, also lots of additional life. She's not alone down there, and everything seems pretty friendly down here too. So the colors are a little bit more pleasing. Then she keeps walking, and when she's walking, ended up getting away from the school of fish and everything. So she's a little bit more alone. Decided once again to play around with color, closer crops of things, so that things started feeling a little bit more closed in. Then she reaches a point and she starts hearing something, and this is where she's like, I'm thinking hopeful, but that's not the right word. Like, just, she's curious. It's like all of a sudden it's like, wait, what's going on back here? Like, not getting too lost in her own little world down there, where it's like she was scared, found something interesting, then got a little scared again, but was going to continue to explore. So it's this idea of just sort of getting lost inside your own head. Like, that's like, sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's scary, but you can really lose track of things when you're in there too long. So there was a bit of a calling here. And so she hears something and decides to explore and go back up to the surface. So you could see here, the whole series is quite a bit illustrative, but this one has a lot more of like a Maxfield Parrish kind of vibe to it. He was an illustrator and used pretty vibrant colors like this, specifically blues and golds like this. But you can see that it's like this cold to some extent, but a little hopeful, right? Because the light that's up here. Then returning to the surface, the ability to explore, things are a little bit more exciting again. So getting closer to the surface, feeling a little energized again, using more vibrant colors to express that, a little bit more hopeful, a little bit more energetic. Then we get up to the surface. So we're returning to a little bit more of a obvious color scheme, back to the surface, more natural colors, like real world stuff. Nothing too imaginative here. So here she is returning to the surface, finding out that what she heard was her mom calling her. After that, she starts walking home with her mom. And you could see that I wanted it to seem a little bit boring, but she's also maybe like a little bigger than she was before. But even though she's now back at the surface, living a normal life, I wanted to show still a little bit of magic around her. So that was why I put in these little fireflies. Walking home at dusk, fireflies are naturally pretty cool, a little magical. So even though she's back there, there's still that element of wonder around. And then at the end, that's her mom kind of already went over the other side. She's about to go over, and it's sort of like a sun setting, new day coming kind of, the world's brighter at this point. So she went on a journey, came out the other side, and is taking those life experiences with her in the rest of her life. So that was a fun little thing for me to return back to a lot of the stuff that I was doing in college, where again, kind of marrying things that I liked, storytelling illustration, and now alla prima. Like I did each one of these in 3 hours or less. So it was fun kind of exploring a new concept with skills that I had acquired over however long I had been doing alla prima at this point. I think I had been doing alla prima for maybe 5 years by the time I started doing this. So that was a lot of work, especially since I said I do alla primas a lot, and they don't take me too long. So that's a lot of work. Okay, but now to just very quickly like deviate from the magic of that little story, diving back down into the bulk of the work I do. Shortly after that, I had done this alla prima, and I once again was a little interested in challenging myself. So I thought like, well, maybe I'll just do many animals, not just one. And I liked the exercise of that, because you paint the same way, but when you have to paint many things, it sort of abstracts them in my mind, where it's not pig 1, 2, 3, whatever, and then you paint them and that's it. You still have to paint the entire canvas at the same time. So they turn a little bit more into abstract shapes of just light and shadow. And so I think about it like that to keep the paint strokes nice and fresh and things feeling very interconnected, like lost and found edges, how the shadow color of this and value really bleeds into this one here. You know, so that's that idea of like a lost edge here. Even these values here are very similar. A lot is just sort of really simplified and again, abstracted down here. Really interesting exercise to figure out how to paint all of that at the same time. But after I had done that, I got a great response to it, and I was asked to paint it again, but paint it big. So you can see some differences. This one is small. This was only 9 by 12. So a little bit sketchier here, lots of life to the strokes. Nice exploration of color, all the stuff that the alla prima will give you. But, you know, how do you translate that when somebody says, I want that painting, but I want it to be 6 feet big? So this one turned out to be 6 feet. And you could see it's also, of course, a little bit more polished than the other. So some of the edges are cleaner. You know, this pig down here, much more fleshed out than what we had here. Right? That's almost nothing. Whereas when you see it large, different decisions need to be made. You need to kind of finish things a little bit more than you would small. But there were things that I really liked about the little study. So I needed to figure out how I could accomplish what I wanted to large that was successful in the little one. So on this, being huge, I just used significantly larger brushes and a ton of paint. So the strokes in the beginning were made just the same as they were on the little guy, but with more paint and bigger brushes. So that was the way that I tried to get around that, at least in the beginning. And then of course, with it being so large and me looking to polish it more, I then started like picking at like individual pigs, like where there was like a big push in the beginning, and then more specific focus later on, just because of the nature of it. Like it's a larger painting, it should be a little bit more, again, polished than the original sketch. And so this here ended up being similar to the pigs. I had done a few hounds, and somebody had inquired if I could do many. So this wasn't exactly the same as the pigs, where it was one that just went immediately into the next. This was, I had been painting some hunting dogs, and I was asked to do a painting like this. So I worked out a composition. And got this done. And so this was just like the pigs. I had, on this one, I had really gone for it and covered the whole canvas at once, like every single thing, the whole canvas was covered, and it looked like a version of this, like super sketchy, but the values were there, and there was an idea of color around. And from there, after that initial sketch had gone in, I started picking at each individual dog. Like I would spend basically one day on each dog. And the reason why I had done that was because the impression was already there. And I was able to paint each portrait at that point like an alla prima, the way I would do for commission work in the past, just one head a day. So this was one head a day. And because the overall impression was there on the canvas, I didn't have to worry about it feeling too isolated, where it was like this head wouldn't work with this head, because the strokes and the colors were already there. I just had to further evolve each individual portrait. And then finally, I started doing this. So this is basically what I'm working on right now, which is an extension of this here. So this, clearly hunting dogs, and I enjoyed that. I liked painting them. I liked everything about it. And so then I thought it could be really fun to do something with a fox as well. They're hunting foxes. Wouldn't it be nice to do a little fox and hound painting? So I spent some time researching different poses for these guys, and of course then composing them. And it took a little time to work that composition out. And you could see super sketchy here, and what I'm going for in these early stages, right? Like that it's composing the animals, composing the light, right? The light as an element, as something to compose as well. And just trying to understand the environment too. Like, what do I want back there? Like, what's that landscape going to look like? So it started like this. The painting is still not done, but this is what it looks like now. So I'm starting to go for like a little bit more depth back here. You could see there's significantly more color in it now. I also reworked his body. You could see that was the original gesture, which felt a little stiff and awkward. And when I was working on this, I decided on this, something a little bit more of a natural gesture. I also like that it was very similar to this guy's gesture too. Little bit more of an indication of a path here as well. So all of this is in the middle of being worked out, but it's just the most recent thing that I thought would be a fun thing to end on, just so you could see kind of what's next for me. And it seems like I'm really starting to lean heavier towards this idea of a narrative, not necessarily something super cheerful and nice like this all the time, but like even this or this, these are a little bit more narrative. You think about things a little bit more when you look at this or this, certainly this, then of course these guys here, that Lily Kitten story, then maybe just this. They're nice paintings, especially ones like this, commission work, you know, this is, you know, everything in its place. They're great, but like for my own work, for what I want to try to do more large scale, does seem to be that I gravitate towards story. I like being able to challenge myself with composition, and with everything that I'm learning about alla prima and how much I like to explore color. This seems to be kind of more like where I'm headed. So one sec, I want to just stop that share and show you this. Where is it? These are some points of inspiration for me, but specifically I wanted to show you these. So this is an artist Britton Riviere, who, now that you saw my fox and hound painting, and how I'm saying how interested I am in stories, this should feel very similar. Like there's a story in each one of these. This is him as well. I think actually all of these are him. Just these really well painted, his focus was animals, and just tying a narrative in with this really beautiful technique of oil painting. So this is hopefully where I'm headed. This is a goal of mine, but I do struggle with time, like finding time for myself. So I think it will be maybe a long road for me to figure out how to actually get the time, but this is where my heart is, at least. I just need to actually get do the work. I want to show you, okay, this was the other one. I just loved this painting. This is Britton Riviere again. This was the first piece I had ever seen from him, and it just like floored me. I absolutely love this painting. Here are a few details, and in the detail here, you should be able to see some similarities to the way that I like to work as well. Just some areas that are thicker, thinner, texture, and temperature exploration.
No, it's not coming in. Mute my.
Okay, so, and then the only other thing that's in here is so this was an illustrator I love too. This is Dean Cornwell, and I love his compositions. I think he's got a lot of really dynamic compositions here, this one as well. Really interesting color, mood. That composition is just fantastic. And he did a lot with like really aggressive lighting. I really like that. I like a strong sense of light that'll show you some pretty cool cast shadows so this one too. Really dynamic, just like the way that's tilted. There's like a real energy to the piece. This is just reppin', and I guess it's sort of neither here nor there, just somebody who I admire. I really love the technique. I mean, he got an incredible amount of expression in his faces. The compositions were always very interesting too, like this kid back here, this guy out here in the window, texture in this dress, fantastic. He's also the guy who painted this, which is possibly my favorite, or one of my top like 2 favorite paintings of Ivan the Terrible. And just, this is unfortunately a low res image, but you can find a high resolution image of this painting, and the face here is just phenomenal. It's so I finding that expression in a face, animal or human, is a huge interest of mine, and something I really want to continue trying to get into my work. So that is about it, and I'm curious if there's any questions about anything, whether it's technique or personal stuff, whatever you guys might be wondering about.
We had just a couple questions, or actually one was a comment, and it was one of the earlier pictures that you had, and the comment was, "I see some of the Little Mermaid influence in the story."
Oh, that's sweet.
Then there was a question about, how you work. Do you normally work from a photograph, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so I do. I used to work from life, of course, and I just don't anymore, but that's not even necessarily anything to do with COVID or anything, just sort of the nature of the pieces that I'm interested in. There's so much photo reference that you can find for things, or photos you can take yourself, that will help when you're doing more imaginative work. But also the fact that I paint so many animals at this point, they're not going to pose for me. So I I ask clients for many pictures, which they'll send, and I'll just choose the best one from there. Or if the photo references are pretty bad, I'll maybe combine a few. But yes, it's basically all, or if not entirely, photo reference at this point.
And then there's a question, can you quickly define alla prima? Is it possible to use this technique with acrylic paint?
Yeah, definitely. I don't have the experience of doing it with acrylic paint, but I believe you definitely can. So as I'm positive you would know, you can put plenty of accelerators or decelerators. What would you call it? What do you call it? What is the stuff?
Paint extender?
Yeah, but the other one, like where you want it to, yeah, right? An extender, like where it won't dry, retardant. Yeah, that's the one. So either one, like where you can accelerate or not. So when you can manipulate acrylic like that, it would theoretically handle not particularly dissimilar to oil paint. The reason, or what alla prima is just anything that you're doing in one sitting. So it's not like you're doing a 2-hour painting, so that's just alla prima, or it's not going to be alla prima because you spent 9 hours on it. It's just alla prima as long as the entire painting is wet, and you're just working wet into wet, which is the definition of it. It's like first attempt, wet into wet, that's what it is. So as long as you're not letting your paint dry and it's a real active process with acrylic paint, I would imagine it would be the same thing. I would think, yeah. Does that help?
And then there was a question about titles and the importance of titles for your works.
Oh, yeah. So I do have, I don't think I have these titles. I did mean to write them down, and let me check here. Because it would be really fun if I found them. And I know I wrote them down here somewhere. Hold on. Aha, I do have them. They're right here. Okay, so let me put this aside over here so I can actually read them. Yeah, so I don't like it when people pick titles that have nothing really to do with the piece. And like I had said before, like where the title is going to do all that heavy lifting for you. I like it when the painting can really speak for itself, and then the title will just enhance it. So hold on, let me do this there. Okay. So this one here is, so you know the story, and you know they don't need titles. I'm sure whether I was talking to you about them or not, you would have some idea of what's going on. But the oh, hold on, I can't see what I wrote here. Okay, here. So now we'll just run through these so you can read or hear the titles of them and just get an idea of how the title will enhance the experience. So, so this one is Something Sparkled Down There. Oh, okay. The known becomes the unknown, and the unknown becomes the known on this one. So clearly just unfamiliar territory. Down she went. There was wonder down there. A path shines bright. Through her wonder, a voice was heard. Follow the voice up towards the light. In all the mystery, something familiar. Brighter than ever, the fireflies shined. And finally, and the world got a little larger.
And this is what I think that the comment about Little Mermaid came across on.
This one? Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, I could see that, I guess. Like the colors and stuff, maybe the composition too, like kind of being in the water. So yeah, that's like how I like to use titles. I like them as just sort of like a little boost to the image. Or if it's something a little bit more ambiguous, like my floating girl, if you say the title is Pulse, then it could be like, well, what does that mean? And maybe particularly curious people might try to look that up or whatever, but like they're just enhancements to the painting, not a gimmick, I guess you could say.
Okay, and if anybody else has questions, you know, you're free not at this point if you want to unmute and ask it, or if you have any other questions you want to put in chat. Wait a second.
I'll ask a question, Jennifer, about the eyes of the animal and how important they are.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak for a moment about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that they're very important. They were always my favorite thing. When I was a kid, I was like hyper focused on eyes, and who knows, like maybe that's like where a lot of the life of my work comes from, is just this natural thing I've been like training myself for ever since I was a kid. I don't know, but I think that they're very important. You know, it's true what they say about there being all that life and emotion in eyes. But I think it's also, it's not just the eye itself, it's that full expression. So like when I'm painting the eyes, I'm also really painting around the eyes, like paying attention to the muscles and like that overall structure. It's not just that, it's not just the ball of the eye, it's all of the expression that's inside the face, that like just work together to get that that emotion in there. It's coming from everything, and highlighted the most through the eyes, but you can paint the best eye in the world, and if there's no structure around it, you're still going to miss it. So you kind of need all of it to work.
You do such a fabulous job. The animals seem so alive and full of character.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Jennifer?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So we so much appreciate your time today and telling us your story. It's just amazing, your talent and your abilities and how articulate and expressive you are in sharing your artwork, and we thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much.
We got one more question.
Oh, good.
It said, I sense that you laugh a little about your training in Florence, so the question is why?
Oh, well, I think kind of just like, because I don't love it when things are too serious. I think I am a serious person. I take what I do seriously. I have a tremendous amount of value in what I do and whatnot. So I am serious, but I don't love it when things are taken to extremes. And I think that like Florence Academy is a program not dissimilar from others who have a very strict way of viewing things and can get quite dogmatic about what they're doing. And I think it really closes people off from experiences, ways of thinking about things, just what you can expose yourself to. And like prime example is like, it was really looked down on, like, oh, you only paint animals or whatever. And I think that's a very limited perspective, an odd perspective, especially when if you just start looking at the rich history of animal painting. Like, I mean, there was pretty massive, big named people in groups who were painting animals throughout history, one of which was Rosa Bonheur, who was greatly admired, which was remarkable because she was a woman, number one. And number two, that people, other painters at the time, would reference her with just as much esteem and regard as anybody else who was not painting animals. So there was this great appreciation for what her and the work she was doing that has somehow sort of like fallen away up until recently. And Florence Academy, of course, was no exception. Like they're very serious about what they do, and there's a big place for that. That's clearly where I learned what I learned. So there's not really much to take away from it, but it does make me laugh how closed off you can get by sticking too strictly to what they teach. And I think that it's something to be aware of and careful of, that like when you're learning something, that's great, but don't close yourself off from the other things people are learning who are not in that bubble with you. So that's just sort of why I laugh about it, especially when people would joke in Florence about, they would joke, but like, I guess not really. They would say things like a good painting is a brown painting. And it's just because they didn't do a lot with color. And that, of course, also makes me laugh that a school which does not teach color nor have too much interest in it would be going around telling its students that they may or may not be colorblind. So it's just, I'll chuckle a little when I think of Florence Academy.
All right, well, thank you for that. Okay,
Yeah.
now there's no more questions, Carrie.